Hi everyone, I'm Tabitha and I've read 5 more books. Regular watchers of this channel will already know this, but I do book reviews every time I've read 5 books. You should know that I don't read just one specific age category or genre. I'm actually a reader of pretty much anything. So I will make sure to tell you what age category, what genre it is, and more importantly, what kind of readers I think will love the book that I'm reviewing. I do use a 5-star rating system to review all my books, so I'd like to take a quick second to tell you about that system. 5-star ratings are reserved for books that I absolutely love, that I think transcend genre. In other words, you might love this one even if you don't normally read the genre it's written in. 4-star books, on the other hand, are books that I absolutely love and think are great books, but they're more specific to the genre they are written for. 3-star ratings are for books that I think are good books, but they have a really niche audience. You might not love this one, even if you normally read this genre. 2-star ratings are the ratings I reserve for books that I think are problematic. I do try to explain some of the problems in the What I Didn't Love section so that you know if it's the kind of thing that would really bother you or not. 1-star rating, on the other hand, are reserved for books that I honestly didn't enjoy and can't recommend. They're just not for me. All right, with that out of the way, let's get to the reviews. The next book I read since the last time I did reviews is Elevation by Stephen King. This is a 2018 release by Scribner. It's adults and genre, I'd call it horror, and it is 146 pages. Your synopsis: Scott Carey has been steadily losing weight, but he doesn't look any different. He doesn't want to be poked and prodded, he just wants someone else to know. What didn't I like about this one? Well, the first thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that it is loaded with stereotyped cliche characters. They all feel really, really cliche, done before, like Stephen King just picked them out of a catalog of traditional stereotype characters. They could belong in any generic movie or book in the world, and I kept hoping one of them would break out of the mold that he created for them, but it didn't. Perhaps that's because this is really a short story, but overall, it was disappointing. I expected better from Stephen King. The second thing I didn't like about this one is that the character development was severely lacking. I wanted to know more about every single character in this story. Sure, we got to understand that they all had the stereotypes that they were following, and we got a little more about each of them, but then it just stopped. There was never any real depth to any of these characters. It's almost like because King knew that he was picking mold-created characters, he didn't need to do development. The third thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that I wanted more answers overall. We're introduced to a really unique concept here that has the potential to be an amazing story. I wanted more time to sort of play around with that and get lost in the world. I had a lot of questions. And because it's a novella, we didn't get any of those questions answered. So what did I like about this story? Well, the first thing I can say I liked about this story is the ending. I don't always need all the answers, as you'd know if you're a regular watcher of this channel. I liked the way this one left me wondering and left me thinking. The answers that I said I wanted when I said it was something I didn't like were answers that came from concept development and playing with it. The ending actually worked for me. The second thing I can say I did like about this is the overall problem in this story is incredibly interesting. Sure, I found myself with a lot of questions about how this thing really worked, and I wish the character had taken more time to play around with it a little bit, but I did like the overall premise for the book and the overall idea behind it. The third thing I can say I liked about this one was that there was no info dumping. I don't know if you've read a lot of Stephen King, and I know I've talked before how I hadn't read a lot growing up, and I'm trying to read a lot more now. Stephen King is kind of known for those long info dumps where he's giving you a ton of information all at once, sometimes pages and pages at a time with lots of detail. Probably because this one was intended to be a short story, it doesn't do that. The information you get as background on the characters or the situation is spread out throughout the story and is short at best. Who do I think should read this one? If you need a feel-good book that won't take you forever to read, I think you should try this one. As a side note, I have no idea why this story was classified as horror when I looked it up on Goodreads. And when I did a little more research, it looks like the publisher classified it that way as well. I would never have called it that. This story has an interesting feel-good twist. At best, it's supernatural, but it is definitely not horror. The next kind of person I think would actually like this one are people who want to try Stephen King but are afraid to tackle a full-length Stephen King novel. This one, being one of his short stories, means that it's not going to take you a long time to read through, and you don't have to commit a lot of time to reading it if you don't like it. My overall rating, I went 3 stars for this one. This one falls to a niche audience of readers, I think. This is going to be the best for readers who don't mind fantasy elements. It's labeled as horror. It's by Stephen King, but it's not Stephen King at his deepest and most detailed. It doesn't have a lot of character development. It doesn't have a lot of resolution. But if all that sounds like your niche, you might enjoy it even more than I did. So 3 stars to Elevation by Stephen King. The next book I read since the last time I reviewed is Fogbound, Empire in Flames by Gareth Clegg. This is a 2019 novel that was independently published. It is science fiction, more specifically steampunk, for adults, and it is 460 pages. And I received a copy of this, an e-copy of this, in exchange for an honest review from the author. Your synopsis. Simmons is a bounty hunter who thinks he's tracking down his goddaughter. Instead, he'll uncover a plan to overthrow the Empress and put his own life in danger. So what didn't I like about this one? Well, the first thing I can say I didn't like is that there were multiple scenes in this book that felt like filler, making the book longer than it felt like it needed to be, and a little slower. The pacing of this one needed to be tightened up for sure. The second thing I didn't really like about this one is that a lot of characters were introduced all at the same time, and without enough unique characteristics to help me keep them all separate or make them stand out. This led to a lot of confusion, forcing me to go back a few times and reread chapters to try to remember who a character was or what their role in the story was. The last thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that much of the book made me think we were waiting for something to happen. You have that anticipation building, but you almost don't even know what you're waiting for. The action is too spread out between the different events. So what did I like about this one? Well, the first thing I can say I liked about this one is the world building is well done. This novel takes place in 1899 London following an alien attack. You could tell that the author had fun with this setting, and I think that made it fun for the reader to learn about this world in this time period. The second thing I liked about this one is that this is the second book I've ever read that was classified as steampunk. I didn't enjoy the first one that I read that was classified this way, but this one I thought was an interesting take on this genre. I liked the way the steam-powered things kept popping up in the story, but at the same time they were not the central focus point of the story. In other words, this story focused more on the characters and less on the technology, and I thought that was an interesting way to present it. The third thing that I can say I liked about this one is that overall all the stuff related to aliens was really interesting, and I liked the way it was done in this book. So who do I think should read this one? If you're a reader who loves the steampunk genre or has always wanted to try it, this is one I would recommend for that. Also, if you're a reader who kind of likes the idea of an alien invasion book teaming up with a steampunk book, I think you would like this one. My overall rating is 3 stars. I think you could tell from the who I recommend this for, that's a pretty niche audience. Overall, I'd say the plotting was a little problematic, but the steampunk elements were really cool. And so I think that's going to elevate it to a point where it's just that niche audience. You have to enjoy the kind of steampunk you're getting here. So 3 stars for Fogbound, Empire in Flames by Gareth Clegg. The next book I finished is Finders Keepers by Stephen King. This is a 2015 publication by Scribner. It is an adult age category mystery thriller, and it is 434 pages. This book is the second book in the series that was started by Mr. Mercedes. Your synopsis. A thief steals unpublished manuscripts and money from a recluse author and hides them before being locked away for an unrelated crime. Decades later, a boy finds the treasure and changes his entire life. So what didn't I like about this one? Well, the first thing I can say I didn't like was Bellamy as a character in general. While he's supposed to be sort of a villain in this novel, he doesn't stand out as being an overly evil king villain like some other stories or some other villains in this same trilogy. In fact, he's also not an overly forgivable villain or one you feel like you can relate to, and that just, to me, made him forgettable, which is kind of a problem, especially in a series that deals with Brady Hartsfield. The second thing I can like about this one, speaking of Hartsfield, is that if you're looking for more of the Mr. Mercedes story instead of a slightly related side story, you should probably skip this book and go straight to book 3. The third thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that Jerome is back and he uses that same stupid voice that he uses in the other ones, and it drives me insane. I listened to it as an audiobook, which was probably my biggest mistake, because then it emphasizes that voice of Jerome's, and it's like nails on a chalkboard. I just don't like it. Every instance of him using that I wish had been cut from this book. So what did I like about this book? Well, I can say that I think my little accident that started whenever I first started this series of reading them out of order was brilliance, but it was brilliance by accident. I actually read book 3 in this series first, and then I went back and read book 1, and it worked for me. Book 3 has all of that heavy supernatural element that I just love from Stephen King. Book 1 read like a prequel and gave me answers to questions I'd been wondering in book 3. It just was really, really well done. And this book, Finders Keepers, read like a mini side story. Although it was long, it read like a mini side story that just gave me more of the characters in the world. It doesn't really tie book 1 to book 3. Like I've said many times in this review, it's literally just a side arc, but that worked for me because I already knew how it ended and I wasn't driving myself crazy waiting for that ending to come. The second thing I liked about this story is Hodges as a character. Now, I liked him in the first and the third book, and so I was just glad to see him come back when he does come back. He's a vulnerable character, although it's less apparent in this book than the others, probably because he's not as important to this story as he was to the others. But I like his realism and I like his vulnerability. I continue to like him as a character. The third thing I can say I liked about this book is the Saubers family. They're introduced in this book. I don't remember them being characters in the first or the third, probably because if they were, they would have been very minor. But in this book, they are amazing. They're relatable. They are imperfect. And I just loved everything about their arc and how they brought something to this story. So who do I think should read this one? If you are a fan of Stephen King's mystery thrillers, not Stephen King's horror, I think you'll like this one. It's a solid mystery. It comes together for fans in a good way, and you don't necessarily have had to read the rest of the Mr. Mercedes series to enjoy this one. My overall rating for this one is 4 stars. It's a solid mystery with a good plot that mystery thriller fans are going to enjoy. So 4 stars for Finders Keepers by Stephen King. The next book I read in the month of December is Loom of Sorrows by Matthew Kagle. This is a 2018 novel that was independently published. It is adult age category, science fiction as your genre. More specifically, this is a dystopian book, and it is 210 pages. I was given an ebook copy of this book in exchange for an honest review by the author, so thank you to Matthew Kagle. Your synopsis: Earth was dying, and Joshua 20 was the only available planet, and it's slightly inhospitable to humans. Then a savior brought them out. They have 2 weeks to unlock important memories that may give them 200-year-old answers to their society. So what didn't I like about this one? The first thing I can say I didn't like is actually not something I didn't like. It didn't bother me at all, but it's more of a content warning for some people because I could see it bothering others. And that is that this book deals with an imaginary religion that's roots may offend people who are heavily religious. I have never been somebody who is heavily focused on a specific religion and studies lots of religions, so it didn't bother me, but it's just a content warning for you. If you are heavily religious or study the origins of religion, some of the things in here about religion may offend you. The second thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that it features some adultery, which is never an issue I love talking about. And not only that, in this case, it felt like an excuse for the author to throw away a character, so I kind of hated that even more. So what did I like? I loved the religion angle. Now stay with me. I know I just mentioned that as something that you might not like, but again, I'm not somebody who studies religion heavily, so I actually really liked this. I liked the way the author made up a completely imaginary religion, and I liked the way the author worked with the roots of that religion and let us look at that a little bit. I thought that was very cool. The second thing I can say that I liked about this one is the world building. The world building in this book is amazing. If you are working on a fantasy or science fiction story and you're trying to figure out how to mesh the world building into your story without using info dumps, I'm going to highly suggest that you go pick up a copy of Loom of Sorrows and read it. I was maybe 4 pages in before I realized I was already learning about this world, but it was so nicely woven into the story, I didn't feel like I was getting smacked over the head with it. Matthew Kagle does a wonderful job of teaching us about this without making us feel like we're being taught at, if that makes any sense. The third thing I can say I liked about this one is that the loom metaphor that runs through this entire book is very well written. That's all I'm going to say because I don't want to spoil anything, but to me, the loom metaphor was really cool, and I found layers to it that I didn't even realize I was learning. The last thing I can say I liked about this one is that it was a very fast read, and it kept me hooked right from the beginning. So who do I think should read this one? I'm going to say if you are a science fiction fan, this story is a hidden gem, and I think you need to rush out and find it. My overall rating is 4 stars. I think science fiction fans are absolutely going to love it. While I don't necessarily think that if you don't normally read science fiction, you'd love it, which is why it gets 4 instead of 5 stars, science fiction fans are not going to want to miss this one. So 4 stars for The Loom of Sorrows by Matthew Kagle. The next book I finished in the month of December is Every Other Weekend by Abigail Johnson. This is a young adult contemporary romance. It's coming to you in January of 2020 by Inkyard Press, and it is 512 pages. Thank you to NetGalley and Inkyard Press for sending me an e-copy of this book so that I could give it an honest review. Your synopsis. Adam's life is falling apart. His parents are separating. Jolene's life was never even together, and her parents are divorced. Forced to spend every other weekend in the same apartment building, Adam and Jolene will form an unlikely friendship. But that friendship may quickly become the best part of their lives. What didn't I like about this one? The first thing is more of a content warning, which you know I like to do with books if it needs it. And for this one, that content warning would be that you're going to be dealing with divorce, death, and even sexual assault in this book. There's a lot of things thrown at these characters all at the same time. You just have to be ready to deal with those. The second thing I can say I didn't like about this one is that this book features some seriously terrible parenting, which is almost like a trigger warning for me as a parent myself and as a former teacher. That stuff always gets to me. These parents are absolutely what not to do in parenting, some of the parents. And I feel like, of course, terrible parents are a rite of passage in young adult books. I get that. But Jolene's parents really made me cringe. They were like bad without realizing how bad they were. They're absolutely the worst people I've read in a YA in a long time. I truly, truly hated them right from the beginning when they were introduced. I do want to give props to Abigail Johnson because obviously they're well written if they're making me cringe like they're real people. But it was hard to get through. So let's talk about what I did like for this book. First thing that I did like is Jolene herself. She is a great character. She knows what she wants. She knows what she doesn't want. She's got this hard outer shell, and you just love her from the beginning. I really enjoyed Jolene. Second thing I liked about this one is the banter between the two. Adam and Jolene have this adorable banter that just makes me laugh. I was laughing out loud while I was reading it. They're so cute. It's just really well-written banter between the two of them. I didn't even know I wanted a book with 2 people having casual banter on adjacent balconies in the cold, but there you go. I guess I did. The last thing I can say I liked about this one, and this is a big one, is that this book takes a really serious look at grief, and I feel like it's done accurately. In real life, we can experience grief for a lot of different reasons, and grief affects everyone differently, and we all deal with it differently. There are a lot of characters in this book going through grief. They're dealing with it because of different reasons, and they're dealing with it in different ways. So if you put all of them together, like Abigail Johnson has done here, you're getting a really, really accurate picture of the different ways to grieve. And I thought that was really cool, and it made grief a central theme of this book. Who do I think should read this one? If you want a contemporary story about teens wading through their lives and the lives that parents have forced them into, this is going to be one of my top recommendations. I'm also going to say if you like young adult romance and the cute little feels it gets you when you think about first love, this is a recommended book. I'm also going to say that if you're looking for a book that deals with grief in its different forms, this is the one I'd recommend. Overall, my rating for this one is 4 stars. I think it's going to please young adult contemporary romance readers with its slow burn romance and its cute little feel-good moments. So 4 stars for Every Other Weekend by Abigail Johnson. Okay, that's it for me on the last 5 books that I read in the month of December. Make sure you comment so I know you're here. Hit subscribe and tap that little bell so you know when I'm back. Keep watching the channel because coming up at the end of the year, I'm going to be doing a big push to talk about everything I've read this year and my big 2019 reading recommendations, which is going to be a video you don't want to miss and you want to bring your TBR to. Keep plotting the path to your dreams and I will see you next time. Bye!